We don't have to wonder if we have a quorum tonight. That's awesome. Sweet.
No, you can't.
Okay, item number 1 is public comment concerning any issue not on the agenda. We got any public comment? You guys are on the agenda? So,
I do.
okay.
I want to apologize to my fellow commissioners for being lax in my duties. But I'm here now.
Got to make a note.
I had the vacation, sorry.
Did you get on, Jeff?
I get that.
Okay. Hey, we have lives.
Gary's better.
He had to drive down Main Street, so leave him alone.
Yeah, that has been quite a challenge.
I'd like to know who's running UDOT and whether or not they have a brain.
Harry Newell.
You gonna answer the second part of that?
Nope. 50% is not bad. Okay, item number 2, Storm Haven Sewer. Do we have anybody from, we didn't have, they continued this from the council meeting, thinking that the people that didn't show up to the council meeting would be able to come and talk.
Well,
But,
we didn't show up for the council meeting.
so you're here to talk about it?
No,
No.
we're okay with it.
Dang it.
We were told, our neighbors informed us, and we're okay.
Did they?
Yeah, we know it's in bad shape.
It is.
Did they happen to talk about any of the proposals that were made?
No, they just told us that it was gonna raise our rate of what we pay, which is a lot better than what I was originally told. I about dropped it and blew a gasket.
Yeah.
So I think being misinformed, all of us up there were misinformed. And once we were informed, I think things have worked itself out.
So I did run off a copy of out of Ryan's packet, right to the nuts and bolts, the different
Here's the whole
options.
packet from last time. I printed out twice as many handouts because I ran out last time. That worked out well, didn't it? You want some first?
Distribute them.
They just maybe put them in their extra mailboxes.
Those are just the options that they talked about, what it cost.
I don't know, let's let Ryan.
How do you,
What is a force main, Ryan?
Force main is a pressurized sewer, so it'll be a pump that then has so it's under pressure.
Instead of waiting for it to run.
Right, so instead of gravity flow, which is what we have now, a force main would be pumped and then under pressure, so typically they flow a lot faster.
you need that?
Typically they what?
They flow faster, at a higher rate of speed, so you have a smaller pipe to convey the same amount of flow.
Sure.
But then everybody has a pump and then
I got mine
energy.
still.
No.
Okay.
Like I said, I printed out twice as many because last time I ran out. And, well, this time I'm not gonna run out.
This time it's smaller font.
I did, I tried to say paper one and print one.
Suddenly it doesn't look as bad as it did in the big picture.
It's still bad.
Okay.
So, given that you guys have already been informed by your neighbors, I will try to be brief and get the planning commission up to date, although some of the planning commissioners have been up there and are far more familiar with the problems than I am. So, just like last time, Kim, when I make mistakes, do you want to just correct me?
Well, sure.
I was gonna say if, but let's just cut to the chase and go with when. It'll be faster. So basically, we've had a number of issues up in Storm Haven on both the water and sewer, but the sewer is what had our attention recently. We had a budget of about $2,500 for the year is what we had inherited and then modified and thought we could, thought was a reasonable number. We spent over $3,000 on one clogged line that's still clogged in 2 places. We can't get the camera through it. We're not even exactly sure how bad it is. We know it's bad, but we're not exactly sure how bad. We know there's a second line that we cleaned, and I'll say I think Kim and Casey did a remarkable job of finding somebody to clean it for less than I'd ever heard of. But even at that, it was more than the budget we had. And so we know of at least 2 areas, well 3, 2 of them are fairly close together, but 2 areas that are failing. And everywhere we've cambered and looked, things don't look really a whole lot better. We've got gaskets missing, we've got cracked pipes, we have roots in the pipes. There's every indication of everywhere we've looked that the system is failing. And if you look at it as a 40-year-old system that's had minimal maintenance, 40 years is about when you would expect things to fail. So it all kind of comes together real quickly. So I was asked to fairly quickly, and without making the budget problems worse than they already were, kind of take a look at the options and where we were and what we needed to do, what the best option was. And so I think that might be where some of that misinformation started, and hopefully we've got that clarified. So the first page here kind of talks about just some history on the 18 lots built in the 70s. There's a map that's now reduced twice to the point that I don't know if anyone can read it, but there's the sewer system. It's basically a gravity collection system of 4 and 6 inch pipe, and then it goes down to a large septic system, and it's a community drain field. And so, knowing that it's failing, or having every indication that at least the collection network's failing, I should add that we haven't had, and this might be where Kim corrects me, any problems with the drain field yet. The septic tanks, other than pumping them in the drain fields, seem to be okay every time we inspected them. My concern is that they were built at the same time by the same contractor, the same material, and I have a hard time believing that they're in much better shape, but they're obviously doing a little better, at least today. So I looked at a number of options, because before you spend a lot of money, I always like to look at all my alternatives. And so I had option.
Whose property is the drain field on?
It's part of what's known up there as the Graceland parcel. It was originally Grace Ernstine, and now I think it's the Ernstine Trust.
How large is that parcel?
3 acres.
So it wouldn't meet single requirement today of 5 acres,
Correct.
and it's draining everything up there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And
Sorry.
then they have their own, I believe they have their own drain field on that.
In addition
On
to
an
this.
adjoining, no, I think it's on an adjoining parcel, but yes.
Okay.
So that Graceland complex is a total of 15 acres, but they've got it broken up into 4 lots.
Okay.
And not
3
all
lots.
the residents drain in there, just 18, is that correct?
Yeah, it's just the 18 in the Stormhaven Plat A. Plats B and C are all on their individual drain fields,
Okay.
which is a problem, but not right now for this presentation. But that'll come up another night, I guess.
Yeah. It's all tied together.
Well, so one option is to build a larger system, hook everybody together. I think that one has a number of challenges, but anyway, I'll get there as quickly as we can. So I had option A, basically rehabilitate the existing system. So in this assumption, I said that the residents are responsible for the laterals, and so that's the pipe from their house to the main collector line. And the reason I said that is a lot of individuals have already done it. Some of the houses are newer, and so those are in better shape, and I'm sure there's a few that still need to be done, but largely that's the customer's responsibility. So with just rehabilitating the system, I said we're not going to worry about laterals. And you'll see on B, I had a different assumption, so that's why I mentioned that. There is 2,300 feet, and if we replace them, according to current code, we have to replace them with an 8-inch main. And I question that a little bit in this situation, but it's the number I ran because that's what the code says. I think a conservative number is $100 a foot right now in today's market. I think if we waited and tried to bid it out in January, we could probably do a little better. The reason that number is so high is parts of it are very deep, and most of it is under a pretty good asphalt road. And so we're talking about a fairly wide trench in the road. It's kind of the worst of the worst, and we may need to relocate it because if we move anything or do anything, we've got to be 10 feet from the water, and I'm not aware of very many places where we have a 10-foot separation. So for all those reasons, I think the $100 a foot is probably not too far off, unfortunately. I'd like to be wrong, but I don't think so. Manholes, we have to have one every 400 to 500 feet. Code says every 400. I've been known to stretch that a little bit in rural areas in some situations, but I went with every 400 feet works out to be about 6. Now the 30,000, I'm assuming that at some point we're gonna have to replace the drain fields. I don't know if that's today. Like I said, I haven't got any indication that they're failing other than just their age. But I worry $20 might be a little low, but it is what it is. I came up with a total cost of $312,000 to go in and replace everything. So, well, that's a lot of money, and when I divide that by 18, that's a whole lot of money. And I said, well, nobody's going to agree to pay that unless I tell them that I've looked at alternatives, because I wouldn't. So option B was a pressurized system. Now, a pressurized system is sometimes cheaper because you don't have to bury the lines as deep. You don't have to follow a grade anymore because it doesn't have to gravity flow. And it's used a lot it's used a little bit in Utah, it's used a lot back east in other areas that are really flat. So they don't have the mountains here where everything drains. And basically every homeowner has their own pump, and they push into a force main or a small 2 or 3 inch PVC pipe, probably HDPE pipe, that's buried 3 or 4 feet deep, and then it goes under pressure to the water, to the tanks. And that's cheaper because it's not an 8 inch pipe, it's not 13, 14 feet in the ground, and we can relocate that on the shoulder so we disturb less asphalt. So it sounded cheaper, but this is why you're on numbers. So everybody would have to install a grinder pump. So that's 18 grinder pumps at roughly $5,000 a piece if you get a good one. And if you get a cheap one for $2,000, you can plan on buying another one, and then you're up to $5,000 pretty quick. So we'll just go ahead and budget $5,000, whether that's the homeowners individually or the system collectively, it's the cost of the same folks. 2,200 feet of 2-inch laterals, and the reason that's important is now we're changing how it works. So all the gravity laterals that are there don't work. We have to change all of them over at the same time to meet this new pressurized system. And so before, if you had put a new lateral in last year, you're good to go because it works. With option B, your new lateral is probably a 4-inch pipe, and now I need you to put in a 2 in a different type of material. So I calculated those. That worked out to another $30,000. I'm assuming we need 3 and 4-inch mains. I think we can do that for $50 a foot. It's $115,000. Replacement of the tanks and the drain fields is the same cost as it was before. And we saved about $20,000, which I like saving money, but we're at $293 instead of $312. It didn't work out to be as cheap as I thought. When I started that, I was really thinking it was going to be like half or less. But I left it in here because I figured somebody was going to ask, why didn't you look at that?
2-inch laterals, that's the pipe from the house to the main?
If you have a grinder pump, yeah. 1.5 to 2 inches is all they do.
So option B, you did not, well, but option A, you didn't factor in the replacement of tanks.
I did, it got hidden in the picture. So replace, you
Oh,
see
that's
the
another
RE
thing.
and then the
Okay,
picture
sorry.
covers it up?
Got it.
It's there, I apologize, sorry.
No problem.
But I promise,
So that's in there.
the 312 includes the replacement of the tanks, it just
So if the
didn't show up.
stuffed bunny gets flushed down the toilet,
It's not getting passed.
The grinder pump turns it into itty bitty little pieces and then it goes
Okay.
through the pipe.
Except you still have grinder pumps that can go bad and
Not can, will.
that. So whether that's a better option or not, even if it's a lot cheaper, I don't know.
To me, the savings, personally, the savings isn't worth it. But I was trying to present alternatives, figuring that we were gonna have a lot of people here saying, you wanna raise my rate to what? Have you looked at options? And so that, the intent was to leave it here, as I did look at it, and I can tell you when I started, I was thinking it was gonna be like $100,000. And say, see, look, it's a third cheaper, and hey, let's deal with the failing pump because we're gonna save all this money. Or not. So then I went to see, because people have asked me this question before, and so if I didn't put it in here, everyone was gonna ask, why not? And the option that has come up and other people have asked is, why do I have to be part of the system? Can I just put in my own drain field and be done with it? And then I don't have to pay your $20, $30, $40, $50 a month? 100, whatever we end up at? And the answer is yes. Some people can probably do that. Other lots, there's really no area that would meet code. All of the lots are too small for a traditional system, so you're talking about what's classified as an alternative system, which most likely has a pump, if not more than one pump, tanks and other things that go both in the house and then out in the yard. So it's a complicated system. I think $20,000 is probably a pretty conservative number. I've designed a few that are a lot more expensive than that by the time we were done. I've designed some that were cheaper. I know that we're in a fairly good, the soil's fairly favorable, so I went with 20,000. I'm sure if there were more people here, we could argue that up and down all day, but it seemed like a good average. When I did that, the number times 18 worked out to $360,000. So one, it's more expensive than everybody getting their own drain field, and two, not everybody can, because there are some lots that are so close to the creek and the lots are so small that it just doesn't physically work. So I think what we'd find is that a lot of people could get off the system, and then we'd have 4 or 5 that just had no alternative. And so either it was no longer a livable house, or we had a sewer system that was still failing and had 5 people on it instead of 18. I don't think that gets anybody, you know, now when I take $312,000 and divide by 5, it's the 18, it doesn't help.
Ryan,
Yes.
back to that 5-acre requirement, is there a way around that for these? Because they're existing, or?
With the alternative systems, there is a way around the 5-acre minimum, but it has to be one of those alternative systems.
How do we, I mean, what is the way around it? What do we need to get around the 5 acres?
I don't know if
Alternative system.
I don't know if I'm familiar with all the system rules, but there's a water quality requirement, and so the alternative systems produce a much higher quality effluent. And then we have to be a sufficient distance away from waterways and groundwater, and we need a certain area to disperse the fluid in, and then we need a 100% replacement area. And that's where, so I'm not aware of an acre, so, you know, if it's more than this size, you can't do it. But there's some lots that it's just physically not possible to have the area you need, 100% replacement area, and be 100 feet away from the creek, and be out of the groundwater area. There's nowhere on the lot that meets that criteria.
What does that mean, 100% replacement area?
So if you need 200 square feet for this drain field, then you have to have 200 square feet somewhere else on your property, but when this one fails, you can build a new one over here.
Oh, wow. And is this requirement from state, county, health department, where does it?
It starts at the state and it's supported by the county. So even a traditional system now, if you build a new house today and design a new septic system, they'll ask you to show on your site plan a replacement area. And so if you have 100 by 50, they're gonna ask for another 100 by 50 box shown on your site plan that says this is where my new drain field goes when this one stops working.
So they held a public hearing, the state had its requirements, and the county held a public hearing, and they raised their requirements higher than the state standard in this county. So it's a higher bar to clear in this county.
When was that done?
That was done, I'm thinking, 5 years ago.
Yeah, quite a while.
It's been a while, but I talked to Tracy and he's adamantly opposed to individual systems.
Who?
Tracy at the health department.
Okay.
And he thinks it's a horrible idea and mentions that a lot of, you know, some lots it won't work at all, but acknowledge that some lots could probably do it.
Just a side tangent, and I apologize for this. I've seen existing lots of record that are way smaller than 5 acres, you're still putting in septic and drain field. How are they doing that? Do they have to meet these same requirements, or is it?
A lot of them.
Or is it because it's grandfathered in, or what, I mean?
I believe some of them are grandfathered in, most of them I understand are meeting the new alternative systems, the requirements for the new alternative systems.
So even though it's new construction, they meet the requirement
Most
because
of
they,
Yeah, so my understanding is most of the small lots are having to do the alternative systems regardless of the grandfather. But that would be a great question for Tracy.
all right, sorry, I didn't mean to get us off.
No problem. So anyway, so I looked at it and I wanted to note it again because I've heard people bring that up over the years, and I thought, you know, good to at least get it on paper and talk. One, it's not cheaper, and two, it's really not completely feasible, so probably not a good recommendation, but there are the numbers. Option D, and I actually really like this one, except for the cost. And you can either do that with, it goes with option A or B, is we can either replace the gravity system or we can do this pressurized system and then run a force main all the way down to the trailer park and tie into Twin Creeks, and then we don't have to deal with our drain field or our treatment at all. So all we have to do is collect it and pump it up to the highway and it's gone. Ultimately, I think that's a great solution.
Are those individual pumps, or is that a collective system?
So if you did the force main system, the force main collection system, that would be an individual pump on each house. If we did a gravity system, we could gravity to those tanks, and right now where it's a septic tank could be converted and we could put a community pump in there.
And that'd be a holding tank instead of a septic.
And either way, it would pump up to the highway and then gravity down. The cost on that works out to be about $1.5 million right now.
Wow.
So while it's a really good idea, it's also really out of the budget. Things that make it feasible are, one, requiring everybody along the path that you go by to connect, which would then allow us to connect to some 60 lots instead of 18, and if you divide by 60, now I did the math and it's actually still more per house than the other alternatives. But you could do that, and then you would solve this other problem of all these individual fields right along the creek that are having individual issues, and while it's not financially the town's problem, it's certainly a water quality problem. I should note that the main town water well is downstream of all of this. So it is our problem, even if it's not our financial responsibility. And so anyway, running through all those numbers, those were the options, and none of them are good, in short. And so all that really came down to a justification for why rates need to go up. Since the individual system is out, you know, you've got both big and little now, that master table, which just summarizes options A through D. And then we talked about the existing system rates, which right now are $16, Kim?
I'm not certain, I think it's 60.
I believe there's 16 right now. Okay. Then we talked about where, if I run this analysis out, we talked about how long it would take to get enough money to replace the whole system at different rates. And it really came down to what we need is about a $60 a month bill if we were going to do a 30-year bond and replace the whole system right now. I understand going from 16 to 60 is a pretty good sticker shock. And so understanding that not all of the system needs to be replaced right now, my recommendation was something along the order of $40 a month, which is not out of line with Heber City and Midway and some other entities. It's a little higher, but not radically out of line. And it's a whole lot closer than we are now. And so that would be enough to replace the deficiencies that we know about. And if we went with option A, which is, you know, one other nice thing with option A is we don't have to do it all at once. If we change the whole type of system, we gotta go in and do everything all at once. If we continue to just repair what we have, we can kind of do it one segment at a time. If we went to something along $40 a month, that would give us enough money in a few years to replace the problems we know about, and hopefully keep us ahead of the failing curve as it went along. I can't promise it will, but it seems like a good step. Worst case, we go to the $60 a month, and then at that point, I would recommend we bond, you know, get enough money to do everything, go in and just get it done. And then keep the rate that high to pay back the bond for the next 20 or 30 years. So, sorry if I tried to go through that a little quicker. I don't know if it worked. But the highlights are the system's failing and rates need to go up to pay for it.
Chad, is that kind of the report you got from your neighbors?
Pretty much. Yeah. So that was a lot better than the first thing we were told. I about died and they said each of our responsibilities was 30 grand. I was like, where are we gonna get 30 grand? Because that's what I was told originally. I was like, you know.
We started that rumor, so half looks good.
So when you're told that it's gonna be 30 grand, you're like, okay, so what do I gotta do to get 30 grand? You know what I mean? I mean, it was like, I think that's what caused a lot of the heartburn up there.
Well, it should be noted too, if I understand it right, Ryan, that if we apply for a grant, there's not a lot of money in that area anymore, but even if we could get a grant at that money, or for that purpose, we've got to have water, sewer rates up to where it justifies things a little more.
We were okay when they told us $40, $60. We were okay with that. It was like, you know, trying to come up with that whole amount up front was what was getting everybody, because everybody said, well, you got to bring up this much. This is your share. And I'm like going, heck, I think we'll just not do anything with our lot then, just let it build weeds and leave. I mean, 30 grand's a lot of money.
Sure.
The question I pose is, let's assume that we have a big dig up there and we spend 60 grand. How does that get taken care of?
If we have to do it right now, we would have to bond.
And then what happens?
How long does it take to get a bond?
At least 3 or 4 months. For the city to get through the whole process, I would plan on 3 or 4 months.
Okay, catastrophic failure and the sewer does not work. And you've got 18 people up there that can't live in their homes. For how long?
I would hope that the Division of Water Quality and some other funding agencies would consider that an emergency, in which case they can approve it and we can get started while we go through the dotting i's and crossing t's. And so what's happened on other emergencies is they'll approve money, but the bond will be approved, we'll bid it out and get contractors going. And while that's happening, we're tying up loose ends on the bond.
And how does...
Frankly, the town sticks their neck out and is at risk for that period of time.
And how does that affect these 18 homeowners over the next 4 or 5 years? I mean, the money's been appropriated and you've got a bond, you still have to pay for the bond.
Yes. So okay, it all comes down to the rates. So rates would go up enough to cover the bond payment and then still provide the maintenance that remains to be done. So the $40 to $60 might turn into $100. Now, I hope this analysis isn't including all those things that need to be done so that wouldn't happen. But what's happened to other communities is the rates go up as high as they need to.
Well, that's the point I wanted to make tonight to a lot of the other homeowners. You might want to pass that on, Chad. But that is a possibility.
I think that's what happened with the Billy Bradley water system.
I was gonna say, and so we didn't talk about the funding mechanism, but what the state has done for both water and sewer systems that have failed and they don't have any alternative, and, you know, the town or whatnot is uncooperative, is they've come in, they've done it, and instead of a bond, they've just assessed a lien on all the parcels that were affected, which is where your $30,000 number or bigger or smaller comes from, because there's effectively a lien on every parcel, so if you sell it, you have to pay that first, and that's how they're gonna get their money back for the improvements they did. But they come in without, it's not a, would you like to participate, it's a here you go, take it, you know, take it or move out before we do it.
Is there a ceiling on what they can charge you, or would it just varies on whatever the cost?
No, it's all dependent on what the cost is.
Eric, describe what the Billy Bradley system situation was.
They had deficiencies in their water, and that's what happened. Twin Creeks came in and redid the tank, put in new lines, assessed everybody on there, put a lien on their properties. So, knowing that they can't show up at the door and say, where's your $30,000, they just put the liens on, and as these properties turn over, or you go to get a second mortgage, or anything, that lien shows up and it's paid off.
But ultimately, everybody ends up coughing up that much money. As, you know, not initially, but when you sell or,
Well,
you know,
trying to build, which
it
is-
devalues your property by that much, frankly. And so I didn't talk about that option because I think with the town being proactive, I don't think we'll need to do that. But that is what the state and, you know, and if the town walks away and says, here, state, deal with it, that's the state's remedy, is we'll come fix it and then here's your lien and you'll pay us eventually, because
And the state will probably
We're not
choose
gonna-
what the option is that they use to fix it.
most likely, yeah.
Pardon me, what was that?
So the state will choose which option they're gonna use.
And the option they're gonna use is to tie into Twin Creeks because they don't wanna run a drain field. They don't want the operation and maintenance, so
The most expensive one.
it's not their money, they're not gonna worry about it. They're gonna do the one that causes the least maintenance and is the best for water quality.
So that'd be more like 80 grand a piece or what, 70?
Yes, but they probably take in everybody along the highway on both sides as they went down. And so that would reduce the cost per person, but it would mean all those other lots in there would be forced to tie, well, whether they tied in or not, they'd have a lien.
That would include Tammy Lane then too.
Tammy Lane and Crazy Acres, and then
Yeah.
probably the properties on the other side of the highway. Even though they're larger acreages, they would,
Still taking them too.
that would, the town, the communities can do that. If they put in a utility, they can force you to connect and pay the fees. The town's never done that, but it is one of the things that could happen, which is
And
not where I
everyone-
really wanna go.
And every one of those additional would have to have a grinder system.
It would depend on how they did it. You could do a gravity system. I didn't look at the gravity system for 2 miles because it was double the cost or more, and I was already in the millions of dollars. It was clearly not a winning alternative.
But
without a
everything,
homeowner
everything
analysis.
where these guys are down
Yeah.
below would have to be pumped
Yeah,
up.
put a lift station
But like, where the gravel pit and all those on that side of the highway, they could just use a gravity system.
Yeah. So I think the Twin Creeks one is viable in the long run, because as Independence develops, that sewer line's gonna march closer and closer, whether we like it or not. I'm sure I like it, but it's reality. So as that sewer line gets closer and closer, I think tying in eventually will become more feasible. But in the meantime, we gotta get these drain fields to last.
What about down there where your place is? Would you have to pump up to that too?
Yeah. So,
Isn't there a limitation on the distance that can be required?
yes,
I thought there was a,
there is, but at least, all the Tammy Lane and Crazy Acre properties are adjacent to Highway 40. And if the parcel's adjacent, you're not gonna meet that distance criteria.
how far off is your property?
So I have, my rental house is on Tammy Lane and it abuts the highway, so that would have to connect for sure. My house is what, 400 feet off? And
Really, that's all? I thought you were further
It's
off
in
than
the
that.
county.
The house is, but yeah.
It's in the county.
My argument's gonna be I'm not in the town, and it's gonna fail miserably, but I'm gonna start with that. But the answer, I don't know, I would think that the parcels, that next row of parcels behind would have a reasonable argument, but all the ones right that abut Highway 40 would,
Does your property abut 40?
no.
A system for just access.
From a water quality standpoint, wouldn't it be way better to get all the septic off of
Yes.
going into groundwater and pump it into the sewer? And
Yes,
that would help improve water quality, would it not?
it would.
Okay.
So what kind of a system does Twin Creek,
Twin Creeks?
Twin Creeks?
It eventually makes its way over to the Midway Lagoons.
So it's just an access, not really, they don't have treatment.
Right. Eventually, all the sewer gets to Heber and migrate, finds its way over to the lagoons. So we would be pumping over to the Midway Lagoons through various entities to get us there
And then it gets sprayed on the hay crops out there, on either side of Southfield.
for a while.
What do you mean, they're gonna change that, or?
Well, Twin Creeks is part of the Jordan Special Service District, so there's a sewer plant over there where they can kick up when,
So Twin
They're gonna
Creeks
pump it
might,
back to us then.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
Why I say for a while.
You pump it uphill, it's gonna come down.
that's right.
Chad, another thing you mentioned after the meeting that we had, no one really brought up the fact that the townspeople in Daniel, they do have a bond and they're paying for their new water system. And it's a substantial amount of money. I believe it's close to 39,000 a year.
The big one is 39,000, and then there's another 5,000 or so. It works out to be about 45,000 a year.
And that's like 30 for 30 years. So it's not as if people are getting picked on. It's just these situations crop up, and then you have to go try to deal with them. And boy, when you're talking sewer and water, right now I'm on the culinary water board with the town of Daniel, and it is so nice to have a new pump house, have new pipes, new valves, and really about the only maintenance we have is to check the pumps are running and the clean screens. But it is at a cost, and we were lucky enough that they were handing out grants at the time, so we were able to get that along with bonds. But that was something that wasn't brought up at that last meeting, that I think a lot of the residents up in Crazy Acres and Stormhaven, they'd all like to think maybe, gee, everything was fine until we teamed up with the town of Daniel, and then all of a sudden we've got all of these problems and all of this expense.
Oh, we knew it had problems before, trust me. We weren't in the dark on that.
Well, I'm just trying to get the town out of the villain
Oh.
structure.
I don't know what some of the thoughts are on that. I just don't want to have it so high that it prices us out of living there. That's what I'm worried about. Because, right now, everything's tight for us as a family.
And
So-
We've got some elderly couples up there also that are on a real
Fixed
tight
income.
fixed budget.
So that's what the concern is. I mean, we gotta live too. And it's like, how do you find balance? I mean, we understand the system's broke. It's not that we don't understand. It's like, you start running the figures, you start running inflation, you start running how everything's elevated. It's like, how's the person supposed to live if you're paying $200 bill on top of your house payment and on top of everything else you have to have, when you're barely making it as it is?
Yeah.
That's the part that's the frustrating part. It's not the fact that we need the system, it's the fact of how are we gonna pay for it?
Well, what we're all hoping for is that the failure that we have comes in slowly and at a low cost and over a period of 20 years. That's really what we're all hoping for. Now, I don't give that good odds, but we are hoping for
Yeah,
that.
it's pretty, some of that system, because I helped my neighbor when his water line broke, and I helped him excavate it, so I've seen the city side, the town side of it, and I've seen the residential side of it, and it was not pretty. I mean, I'm not gonna lie.
No, I think we're talking about the sewer tonight. The water, the discussion on the water is very
But-
similar.
But the sewer, well, I'm gonna tell you right now, I know there's a problem with the sewer, because they laid the water line with the sewer. And I found that out when we excavated it. And I says, and I know that's not code, because I used to excavate for a living. And so when I found that, I'm just like, going, oh my gosh. When they did this, I know back when they did it, they still had laws and stuff that you weren't supposed to do that. They did it anyway.
Well, so we finally made it, for better or worse, we made it on the Division of Drinking Waters list. And they're going back and finding out how many things got done that they approved or didn't approve or didn't know about or didn't know about that are, they're finding rather shocking.
Yeah, so what I'm worried about is the sewer. I know that the sewer's the thing that we're talking about now. Okay, so we get a bond for the sewer. We know the water system's failing up there, so then we get a bond on top of that bond.
So the one,
How do you afford it?
the one good thing we have going for the water system is you divide by 54 instead of 18. The bad news is the number, the total, the dollar figures are a lot bigger, so you end up in that same range pretty darn fast. And I mean, my goal here isn't to sugarcoat anything, but I mean, those are, I run the numbers on the water system too, and to bring it up to code and make it work is not a pretty number. The town, I mean, the council, Eric, you know, Kim certainly know all this, but we've worked very hard on finding grants, and we've been pretty successful finding grants for that neighborhood. We got almost $200,000 for the culverts in grant. We've got $40,000 from the water system that was all grant. And it didn't fix it, but it made it a lot better than it was.
That's true.
And we applied for a $250,000 grant this year and didn't get it, but we're gonna apply again. And I mean, we're looking for, and we're using the town umbrella to apply for free money and do the system with as little impact to the residents as we can. But as the EPA and the state come down and say thou shalt, you know, there are times when our hands are tied, and I think it would be prudent for the community as well as the town to start raising rates and having some money in the bank, because we know it's coming. And even if I'm as successful as we possibly can be with grants, we're not gonna find grants for 100%. We're gonna find a 50% match, or a 60% match, or FEMA's gonna be a 75% match, is one of the best ones out there. And you better have the 25% in your pocket, or they can't do it. And so, the reason I'm suggesting rates is, one, we know things are failing today and we have repairs we need to make tomorrow. We just don't know how big that is yet. And two, if we can get some money in our pocket, then when that grant opportunity comes around, we can say, yeah, we've got that match, we're ready to go.
Chad, as valid as those points are that you're making, I happen to be on the Billy Beathers system. And for about the last 3 years before they redid the Billy Beathers system, the water was so bad and it never met the drinking water standards that we were buying drinking water. And it got to the point where there was talk about, there were 19 residents on the Billy Beathers system, and there was talk about the drinking water people were going to issue dehabitation orders. So as bad as the thing is about having to come up with money or to take out loans or to do bonds or whatever else, it would be even worse to have a note on your door when you get home from work saying you may not possess or live in this property anymore until the sewer's fixed or the water's fixed. That would be even worse. And we got, and I'm not aware of what you said in the liens, I'm gonna have to go look at my property. No,
Sorry.
But we got notified that all of the residents on that Billy Beathers system were going to participate in a 30-year note. And our water rates are horrendous. And most of it is the system bill. It's not for the water itself. It's paying off that 30-year note. And I said, well, is there any way between now and 30 years that this note, you're gonna be paying this for 30 years over the lifetime of the note? And I said, well, what if I go to sell the property or whatever? Well, whoever moves in there is gonna be paying it. And they said that was the only way that I was able to get out of paying that 30-year note. But when I thought about it, and I figured, well, you know, if I was issued a dehabitation order, my property value would be zero. I couldn't sell that to anybody. You know, so there's all sorts of things to consider. All sorts of things. I tend to agree with you, Ryan. I think that spreading it out over 56 is a whole lot more equitable.
No. And the water system can be spread out over the 54, 56, because that's how many people are connected to it. It's really these small systems with small numbers, and I've done this all over the state, and you know, when you have 100, 200 connections, $1 million gallon water tank for $1 million isn't so bad. I mean, it's $1 million, but you divide that by 200, 300, 400, you know, Sandy, you divide it by 50,000, it's like nobody even notices. You get down to 18 connections, and every time you sneeze, the water bill changes, or the sewer bill changes. And it's what we, I mean, at the same time, it's why we don't live, we live up here because we don't want to live down there. And so there's cost and benefit trade-offs. But these smaller systems are hard because you can't spend the money and you don't have the resources that the bigger communities do. Salt Lake wanted to raise $10 million, and you raise every bill by $1, and you got it. If we were talking about $1, there wouldn't be that many people complaining. Here, to raise $1 million, we have to raise it by, an outrageous amount of money.
Well, the good thing about our system is we drink the water out of the tap now, where we never did before. Brett Coomer found dead pot guts in the holding tank.
So how much is the water bill, which can I just ask?
For us, well, I pay almost a full year at once, so I don't really pay
What
attention
the
to
breakdown
it.
is per month?
I'd have to go home and look at it. I'll find it out for you.
Because I just gotta, for budget purpose, we've gotta know what's gonna hit us. Because being blindsided is not very fun. If they tell you, yeah, you gotta do this regardless, and then you're blindsided with it, it's like,
I'm thinking it's around 50, but I'd have to go look up a bill and make sure. Like I say, I don't mess with it on a monthly basis. I pay 12 months at once. I pay it in advance.
so it'd be $50 for the water, and it'd be whatever for the sewer, so that's one thing I was asking about, because if one's gonna go up, we know the other one's gonna go up, because they're both in bad shape.
On my properties in Salt Lake, Chad, I was paying easily $30 to $40 a month for a water bill. We just get in the habit up here of, it's so cheap and it's so wonderful, and then when it goes up to match what everybody else's is, or maybe a little bit above it, everybody freaks out.
Well, we're paying higher than that right now, that's why I was wondering.
Higher than 50?
No, but,
51 with the two combined.
yeah, so we know it's a 16.
During the winter time, it goes up during the summertime, the more we water or
Because our
things
third,
like
we only
that.
get 8,000 gallons, and so 8,000 gallons will take. So it's already, some of our neighbors have $150, $200, $300 water bills
Oh, yeah.
right now.
Depending on what water they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, I watch the system, how often the well's on, and if you brought me in tomorrow and said, here's the water demand, will that well do it? I would say absolutely not. There's no way that this water system, the system and the pumps we have can keep up with the demand and the number of connections that are there. It doesn't pencil out, it doesn't compute. And I mean, I'm on the system, I have a house on the system, and I can tell you there are times when it doesn't work. Because, you go to take a shower, and I'll come back in an hour. After some of these sprinklers come off, maybe the pump will catch back up. So it's not working, that's not the way the rules are set up. And the more the state looks, the more they realize how that never should have been permitted, and yet it's here. So I'm hopeful they'll take some pity on us as far as grants go, knowing that they were part of the problem. But right now, money is really, really tight.
See,
So,
we do that too.
and so,
It's just.
I think we're gonna delay, I don't think the goal is to just come in and spend as much money as we can, raise the rates and bond. But as we get told and forced to do things, we may not have a choice.
And that's, we understand that too, it's just poor people have poor ways, and sometimes what pushes you out of the edge, if you can't make a property payment or you're making a water payment, what bills do you not pay? I mean, you know what I mean? I know people that live that way. Unfortunately, luckily, we don't live that way. We've been fortunate enough that we're okay. But there are other people that do that. They choose which bill they're not gonna pay that month because they don't have money. And I know people in this valley that have lost their homes, and it's sad. And so when you start adding all this stuff up, and you sit there and you go, my ancestors settled this valley, so did Julie's. And to think that we can't even live here where our ancestors sweated and plowed the fields up and moved the common logs off of the fields, it's kind of disheartening.
Our system, our Billy Beather system was so bad, it had either been condemned or was just on the verge of it. And the state engineer's office, the water department's office, drinking water, said, well, you're gonna get this system cleaned up, or we are gonna issue dehabitation. And for the record, the Twin Creeks did not want to get involved in it.
No.
But they eventually were the only entity that really had the ability to fix it. And I think that they got some of the bonding like you talked about. I know it's on a 30-year basis, because I was You know, I thought, how long is this gonna go on? Well, 30 years.
I think the answer, I mean, I know Twin Creeks didn't want to get involved, but it takes an entity like Twin Creeks or the town or somebody else to say, I'll do this, makes it a lot better for the residents than saying no. Because if the town says no, then it's probably gonna be Twin Creeks or it's the state themselves. And the more distance you put between you and that entity, the worse it gets.
That's right, we just need to figure out a solution that we can afford, because if people start not making their bills and they lose the property anyway, you're gonna lose it all anyway. Even if you sell the property, I mean, if people still owe money on the property and the banks take their share of the foreclosure or whatever. I mean, there's always that too. It's not just, you know, you put a lien on a property, but if the bank has the first no, guess who gets paid first?
I think we realize that, and I realize this wasn't a rosy picture, a rosy meeting, but I think the earlier we get the information out, the better we'll be. And I'm still getting GDA to try to buy me a bulletproof vest so that we keep having these conversations.
Good luck.
Yeah, that's what you said.
We're not ready to lynch anybody, so you're okay.
We haven't heard back from drinking water yet.
Thank you, Ryan. He's an engineer, they don't know how to sugarcoat anything. That's why we hired him. Well, Chad, you can just keep right on top, and we're at number 3.
Well, boy, it's kind of disheartening now that we got all this news, but I still think we're gonna try to push forward because we have to have a better place to live, so you want me to come up there?
You bet, come on up, talk to the commission, and tell them what you're up against.
We're doing something that's a little unconventional, or we want to try to get permission to do something that's a little unconventional. And we want to build a post-moving building, a house, and basically, we've looked into a lot of different options, and some of the options we've decided as a family were just not feasible because we couldn't make the payment. And the bottom line is we gotta live. And so I was looking on the internet and I found residential, was just looking at any kind of residential buildings, and all of a sudden I found this on, and it's Cleary Building Corporation. And what it is they're basically post and beam into the ground, and some of them are slab on grade, some of them have suspended floors in them, but they have for the crawl space. Anyway, there's different options in here, and when I talk to the Cleary representatives here in Utah, they say that they do in whatever area they're building. So we just did a preliminary on it. I brought one of the brochures that kind of shows some of the different options that they do on these buildings. I'm just going to pass it around because I don't have a copy of it, and have you guys look at it and see if you want to say yay or nay. And the other thing is for the price that we can afford, this puts it where we can afford it. And that's the reason why we're choosing this style home, whether we can do it or not, it's up to you guys. If not, that's fine. We'll just have to figure out something else. And the other thing is our lot, and I know we're not here to show my lot, but our lot is kind of a peculiar looking lot. And we can maximize the space with a building like this and put it right in here. I don't know if you can see that, but we can actually run this and still hit our setbacks on the lot. So that's kind of what I would propose. That tells a lot of things, but I've talked to the guy at Cleary is down in, was it Payson, Julie? Payson is where this particular place is located at. And they do a lot of barns and stuff too. And it's gonna be kind of on the same lines of that, other than we're going to sheetrock the interior. We would like to, it's gonna be a home. It's not gonna be like a barn with a living space above a barn. It's gonna be the living space. And the other things that we looked into is there's a 50-year warranty on the beams and everything that goes into this building. And there's a 25-year warranty on the roof and a 35-year warranty on the siding on it. And so that's pretty hard to beat in anybody's. I guess it all depends on how long Cleary's been in business, but they've been in business for a long time. When I worked at the care center, they have a Cleary building out back and it's still standing, and it's been there for a long time. And so I like the way it was constructed. So I started to look around. So my thing is we just need to see if this is something feasible, something that we can build, if this is something that is allowable by Daniels Township, where we live out in the rural part of town anyway. And I just would But, you know, whatever decision you guys make, it's fine, but I just gotta know where we stand.
Well, we have a Cleary building on our property. It was built well, it's economical, it's held up excellent. I think it was built maybe 10 years ago now, 8. And it's a nice building, the people were good. I would recommend the building for sure. I don't know about the housing part, but it's a shed. And
Yeah.
the insulation fell down inside, they came and replaced it all, didn't charge us a penny.
And that was the other thing that I liked about it, the R value in the walls is R21, and the ceilings are 38. And so that was another thing that it was a big seller. They said, once you get it warm, they said, can hold it warm, keep it warm. So I don't know how true that is, because we get harsh climate up here. But most of these homes are popular in Oklahoma. And I Googled a lot of, when I researched it, I just didn't want to jump into something that we bought and it's gonna be a maintenance problem. I don't want that, I'm crippled up, I don't want, you know, fixing things all the time. And so that's why we decided it was economical, but then again, it's not a conventional home either, so.
Okay, does the commission have any questions for Chad?
What square footage is required in your neighborhood? Is that something,
Because we don't have the square footage.
in that neighborhood or anything like that?
I don't know, do you guys have a homeowners association up there?
No, they just, it's all been gone. And so the building that we're gonna make, or we wanna make, is 26 by 60. So it's roughly 1,600 square foot.
Okay.
And it's all on one level because we don't want anything, I don't wanna climb stairs. So,
My question, Chad, is whether the fire department would approve it and whether the county health would go along with it.
I talked to the fire marshal,
Excuse me.
and we have to put a fire suppression system in it. Regardless of whatever route we go, it has to have a fire suppression system, because there's not enough flow up there on the system that's there. And so it will require a fire suppression system on that side. But as far as the health department, I talked to Tracy. He told us we were okay to put a house back on there because there's already a structure on there. But I didn't tell him that we were gonna do a posted beam because at the time we weren't gonna do that. So I might have to re-talk to him and see if he still will allow it. But we're not hooking up any more bathrooms or anything that we don't already have on the property.
Well, when we got, if we received your plans and your detail and your site and all of that, it would go to the engineering, GDA, and they'd look at it just, and compare it with the town codes. I don't know if it'd ever fly.
But we sent him a preliminary.
So I sent it to our plan reviewer and our structural engineer to see what he had to say, and they both said it's unconventional. And then they looked through the code a little bit, and they said, but if it meets the code, they don't see any problems with it. And so there's certainly, the residential building is different than a barn, and so it'll certainly be held to a different standard. But the brochure that we were provided looks like they can meet all those things. And so I don't have a formal set of plans, I haven't done a formal review, but based on the brochure and what code and structural said, is it can be done.
And it's different than a barn because it has more posts in it than the barn does. And I had them with an 80-pound snow load. The trusses are closer together than they would be on a regular pole barn. And so it meets the 80-pound snow load. I was very specific on that to make sure that we had the snow load, because last thing you want to do is put something in and have the roof collapse on you. And so it does, the residential is different than the barn because it puts the posts at 4 foot. Every 4 foot is a post. So to carry the load, carry that snow load. And so it is definitely different than a barn, even though everybody can say I'm living in a barn, but you know, at this point, I'm just kind of at you guys' mercy, because what we're living in is, we either got to dump a ton of money into it still, you know, keep living there, or tear it down and put something else up.
So tell the commission what you're in right now, Chad, and what your plans are to do with that.
We're in a trailer right now, a single wide trailer. We did get a variance a long time ago to put another trailer there. We don't want to do that. I think it's not good for the property. We do have a variance to do that, but I'm opposed to it myself. I don't want it there. That was our other option, because if this fails, we'll have to fall back on the variance that we already have, because it's the only thing we can afford. And so, you know, we're kind of in a bind.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the things that we have to look at. It's either we put another trailer in with the variance that we already have recorded and deeded on the property, or we try to go with something better.
So what's your plans with that trailer?
It's gonna get,
Remove it?
well, it's gonna get bulldozed.
Okay.
It's not gonna stay there. It's, trust me, it's going.
Okay.
Right.
We've lived in it for 13 years and it's outlived its usefulness and I don't wanna dump any more money into it.
Any other questions for Chad? Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
So when this request come in, I went through the code. There's nothing that I can see in the code that would prohibit this. There will be probably some things they'll have to do with the posts and some, things like that, but there's certainly nothing in our code that would prohibit this kind of a building
It meets codes.
being converted into a house. So like we say, once the structural review is done. So how do you guys feel? Give maybe Chad a little direction on.
Well, I just hate to see a booby track come up for Chad and the family. And if we really think that he's gonna meet code here and we can make it happen, I mean, our job as commissioners and, we're trying to get everything to work that we can for the public. So, if there's not a booby trap, I'd hate to see him invest $4,000 or $5,000 in engineering planning and site work, and all of a sudden, gee, we forgot to tell it, we forgot to mention this, and all of a sudden you're shut down. Looks like to me that we've got a green light on it.
So how is that gonna work for you?
As far as
Getting them to submit something that could be reviewed?
it's gonna cost, we have to pay money down before they do it. That's why
Before
we
they
wanna do a preliminary. And let me see I have it here. I came prepared. Let me see what the cost breakdown.
But it sounds like what they've done is told you that they'll meet whatever structural requirements are required.
Yeah, and we have to put down $9,936 before we get a set of engineer plans.
Chad, is there any deal buster for your suppliers that if code comes back or the engineering comes back and says, well, you've got to do this and this and this, and they look at it and say, well, we'll do all of it but that one. And if you say, well, that's what they're requiring out of us, and your supplier says, well, then we can't supply it to you. Is there any kind of a deal buster like that you see coming?
I know that when I talked to of course, he's a businessman, he wants to make it sell. But when I talked to him, they said that they engineer it for specific areas that it's gonna be in. So
When they say that, Chad, do you say, well, put it in writing?
I'm gonna have to tell them to put it in writing.
Because if they put it in writing, it's very hard for them to say, well, we didn't know that this and so we're not doing it. But if you've got it in writing in advance,
Yeah.
that they will meet everything that the engineering department says.
There's a clause in here too that says that if additional work has to be done for the digging of the post or whatever, it's in addition to the cost of whatever. And so they've kind of put that in there that's on the homeowner. So we're going into it knowing that if there's added cost, it's on us. And so I still think even if we had an additional cost, we're still gonna be able to afford it because these buildings are a lot cheaper than a normal house.
I guess what I'm getting at is in business, where I've been in business in the past, many times I've had to put it in the agreement, in our original agreement, that you will include this, and I will go ahead and pay you your down payment or your prepayment or whatever. However, if something comes up where it causes the deal to go away, I get my money back. And this, just that one little line in the contract really has been valuable for me personally. There's been a time or two where I've actually said, well, okay, we can't do it, but I need my deposit. Oh, no, you don't get your deposit. I said, go back and read the contract. And I've gotten my money
So
back.
make sure that we're.
Yeah, and Eric, my thought on this is, we've kind of had a few come up in Daniel where they've been put in as barns and people tried to live in them. At least these guys, they're saying, well, it's originally like a barn, but we want to live in it. They're up front with it.
Yeah.
And if there's no reason in the code that would prohibit it, I'd say, by all means. That's my personal viewpoint. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Well, just because Cleary builds barns doesn't mean the structure they're building for him is a barn.
Especially if it meets,
It's a style of building.
yeah, especially if it meets all the
As
requirements.
opposed to being construction, which is fairly
That's
unique
right.
for this region,
Right.
Yeah.
It's
but
a
not
different form of
outside of the
construction.
building
It
code.
has to meet building codes, and if it meets building codes,
Then it's
I-
a building.
yeah, go for it.
And I don't see how it's that different really from an engineered building or a modular building or a trailer, or it's just something different. And they've been building them for a while.
But just, you know, on the personal note, that's what I'm saying is that
Yes.
get yourself protected so you don't end up with.
I'll
you
bring
know,
you with me, Tom.